Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the webinar today. This is the last webinar of the school year, and we have been doing these webinars for 2 years, and we are very interested in your feedback for the topics that we want to offer for the next school year. So yesterday, a webinar was sent out on the OSPI listserv to gain your feedback. So I'm Denise Ackelson here at OSPI. And we have some great folks here from Washington Student Achievement Council to talk about college savings planning.
Hi there, my name is Jackie Ferrato. I'm the Community and Employer Relations Manager for the Guaranteed Education Tuition Program, which is with the Washington Student Achievement Council. So I appreciate this opportunity to share this information with you. We're going to talk a little bit about mostly we're going to focus a lot about the 529 plans and how they work. And so the GET program is a 529 plan. I'm also going to talk about the update on what's new with the GET program and the new savings 529 college savings plan option that's going to be coming up. And then we'll take care of some Q&A kind of at the end. So I look forward to hearing your questions or getting your questions as we type them in anytime you want to, and then we'll get to them in the end. One of the last slides you're going to see today, too, is going to be my contact information. And so I encourage you to either contact me directly or our contact center. You'll see the email address later with any specific questions that you might have, and then I can reach back out to you. So moving forward, we're going to talk about some food for thought. So one of the most important aspects about saving for college is how it's tied to student success. And a study in 2013 indicated that students with a college savings account in their name are most likely to attend and finish college than those who don't. And it didn't even matter how much was in that college savings account. And that's encouraging to me. It's been encouraging to a lot of families who actually have a GET account, because the goal for them has been really just about the savings and making sure that their students have something available to them to cover expenses when they're ready for college. With student loan debt over $1 trillion, our goal is to provide information and resources that are going to help students and families learn about options to reduce student loan debt. So 529 plans are one of the most popular and beneficial ways for parents and families to save for college expenses. So let's start right there about what is a 529 plan. And most of the time when I'm presenting this information in person, there's lots of people. I ask the question, how many people know what a 529 plan is? And they raise their hands, and we all know. So this could be a lot of just a refresher for you, but we'll cover it nonetheless. So a 529 plan is a tax-advantaged way to save for college. So the savings grow tax-free when it's used for qualified educational expenses. Now, one important thing to realize about 529 plans is that there are 2 types of 529s. There's what's called a prepaid tuition plan, which is what the GET program is. And there's about 10 or 12 other states that offer prepaid tuition plans. Then there's what's called a college savings plan. These are the traditional types. And most states have the traditional 529 saving plan. Washington is considering that. In fact, we'll talk about that towards the end, about that type opening up here in Washington as well by early 2018. So when we're thinking about what Washington has or considering that in terms of 529 plans, Washington will have both types coming shortly, but also most states will have just the savings plan. Other states will have prepaids, and then many, many more have both types. So what are the benefits of a 529 plan? And I get asked this question a lot, why would I consider a 529 plan versus other things? And the first thing is that it grows tax-free. And the withdrawals, so when the student is actually using that money, it remains tax-free when it's used for qualified higher education expenses. So the students can actually attend colleges and universities all over the country, so anywhere in the U.S. and even in foreign countries. And college and universities is not strictly a 4-year. The students can use money from a 529 plan at community college and technical vocational schools, again, anywhere in the country. and including foreign countries. So the rule of thumb on that using them at schools is that the school or university or college has a U.S. federal ID code. And then also with a 529 plan, the money can be used to cover tuition, fees, room and board, books, and required supplies. And this is true across the board. It doesn't matter which 529 plan you have or from which state, those are what you can use it for. And the whole point of a 529 plan, again, with the tax advantage on it, is helping to reduce reliance on student debt. So the more money that that is saved reduces the amount that has to be borrowed in the future. So now let's talk more specifically about the GET program and how that fits into that 529 picture. So the GET program is a prepaid tuition plan. It was opened in 1998, so we're going on 20 years coming up. And the program helps families pay for future college expenses. And again, the same federal tax benefit applies whether or not it's a savings 529 plan or another state's prepaid tuition plan. And when I move through these slides, I'm going to be able to show you some examples of what that looks like too, in terms of using money from a GET account at another school or college. So how does GET work? And the GET program works on what's called a unit system. So 100 units represents 1 year of tuition and state mandated fees at the highest priced Washington public school. So we focus on the UW and WSU because those are the two highest priced public institutions in Washington. If you remember what I mentioned in the previous slide, even though the formula is based on tuition at UW and WSU, the money saved can still be used at any public, private, community, vocational, technical school anywhere in the country. So keeping that 100 units and 1 year of tuition formula in your mind, that's the baseline for understanding how you're saving money. So if each time you're putting money into an account, you're actually accumulating units. And as you accumulate units, and the maximum right now is 500 units per student, then you're able to get an idea of how much you're saving and how you can continue to be saving as your children are getting older. So an account owner or a student must be a Washington resident when you're opening up a GET account. So for clarification, when in 529 plans, if you have a savings type from another state, there's typically not a residency requirement on opening that account. That means that anybody from anywhere in the country can open an account from that particular state. So if we're living here in Washington and you happen to like the 529 savings plan from Virginia, you can open that up. Prepaid plans, so those states that offer a prepaid tuition program, a type of 529 plan, they will typically, as we do, have a residency requirement on it, meaning that either the account owner or student needs to be a Washington resident when the account is being opened. However, the student and the family can move anytime after that and still have access and the benefits of using the account. The other thing about saving is that anybody can contribute, and it's an encouragement to let your family and friends know what's important to you and what you're doing in terms of preparing for your kids' college. And a good example of that is when I was opening accounts for my children, who are now actually 31 and 26 years old. So when they were younger and I was saving for them, I let my family know what I was doing. And so my mother, my brother, and my sister and other family members, aunts, uncles, anytime there was a holiday or a birthday, were making contributions into my kids' accounts. And I wasn't specifically telling them how much to put in there. They were just contributing what they felt they wanted to contribute. And that's what helped that college savings account grow for my kids. So putting money away for a kid's college is a really great gift idea. So savers can choose from, again, in the GET program, one of two types of payment plans is what we call them, or a combination of the two. So one is called a lump sum plan, where you simply put in any contribution amount, or other people are contributing, that you want to. There's no specific dollar amount that you have to do. You can be random about it. I mean, meaning you can put it in every month, every week, once every year. Lots of people who use that feature also contribute through payroll deduction on a regular basis. or through an auto withdrawal from their bank account or savings account, and even grandparents just doing it on birthdays and holidays. The second type of plan is called a custom monthly plan, and that one is actually a very specific choice that you're making, that you want to have a certain number of units, and based on the amount of time before your student would start college, you would have a regularly scheduled monthly payment. Now, you can have a combination of those two accounts, and that's an example of that is what I did with my youngest son, is having both types. So I was putting money in lump sum, and so were other contributors, but then I also made a regularly scheduled monthly payment. So those will be the options when you're able to enroll again, of how people choose making payments or making contributions. So keeping it going is often kind of the key to most anything. Getting started is one thing, and then keeping it going is the second one. So our recommendation and suggestion really is to think about how you're going to do that regularly. Maybe putting portions of your tax refund or pay raises into your college savings account, or simply setting up an auto pay out of your bank account, or doing payroll deduction. But the key here is to make some sort of kind of commitment and decision to save regularly, and whatever that amount is a good amount, and then to increase that as you feel you're able to increase that. So keeping track of some important educational milestones too tend to be an opportunity to kind of refocus and rethink about making those contributions. I have a grandson now who's 6 years old, and as he started to into kindergarten, we started to look at, oh, there's a milestone, and we revisited how much we were putting away. So reminding loved ones about the gift of college savings, that's a really great idea, and we can help you with those, getting your family members understanding of the program and how they can make contributions when our enrollment period is open. Consider other ways of saving too. That's the one of the coolest things about I think saving in general is just that you don't have to do just one type of thing. And I encourage families all the time that when you're saving along the way as your children are getting older, to always be looking at what are other things that you can be doing along the way, or to supplement one way of doing it versus another way. For example, we also have a savings account at the credit union for the grandkids, and so even though we have the 529 plans, we're also putting short-term money away, and we often transfer between them. So as the kids get older, taking your kids on college campus visits really generates that reminder of the importance of what you've been doing, and you could talk to the kids about that, and that really helps to get them focused on what that's going to be like, and their participation in the savings and their college experience. And then as the student starts 11th and 12th grade, certainly begin exploring scholarships and financial aid early. So understanding what your options are going to be is really going to be helpful in pulling those pieces of money, those financial resources together well before the student is going to be ready for college. So once you have a GET account, and again, I'm focusing more specifically right now on the GET program, but even with other 529 plans, the processes, internal processes may be a bit different, but the concept of it is the same. So once you have your money saved in your GET account, how do you actually get the money out or pay for it to the school or make the payment directly? And we have a process, either what's called a direct payment to the college, or if you pay your expenses to the college out of pocket, which many parents and families do, you would then simply request a reimbursement. And in many, many cases, families will do both. And an example of that is when my son was attending the community college, I would do a direct payment to the college to have the GET program pay the school for my son's tuition and fees. But then when he bought his books and any required supplies, we would buy that separately, and then I would request reimbursement, which came out of the GET account and came back directly to me. So the student can use up to 125 units per year, but also anything that's carried over. And so what that means is that if you have, let's say, a 400 unit amount for your student, the first year that they're ready for college, they can use up to 125 units. But let's say they were attending a community college where they wouldn't need as much because the tuition isn't as high at a community college as it is at a four-year institution like the UW or WSU. You might have more money left over, more units left over. So those would carry over into the second year. So you could see in a scenario like that, that potentially as the student got farther along in their academic career at college, that they would have more units available in the later years than in the earlier years. So GET is right now nearing the 1 billion mark in distributions to college students, and so that's a huge milestone for us because that means students have been, accessing this money and using it at colleges again all over the country in the past 18 years. And in fact, there are students attending colleges in 14 foreign countries right now and using units there for their college experience. So now the top what ifs, four what ifs. I hear this is the main things that people always wonder and always ask about, like what if my student gets a scholarship or they decide not to go, or they've moved out of state, or even as you're making contributions, our financial situation might change. So what happens with the money if any of these scenarios come into play? So in terms of the scholarship, one of the very first things that we always encourage families to consider is what other things may still need to be paid. I mean, what exactly is that scholarship covering? And that's a great thing when the student has received a scholarship. And if it's conditional, like the scholarship is only covering tuition, is there room and board that needs to be paid? Is there other fees or books and required supplies? Is there a reason that you might leave the money in the account and let it roll over to the next year because there's a possibility that they may not have the scholarship in a later year? So you don't have to use all the money all at one time. You can let it sit there and continue to roll over. And you can also transfer it to another family member. So in a situation where there might be two kids off at college at the same time and one gets a scholarship and one doesn't, maybe there's an opportunity that you could be transferring funds or units between the siblings. So those are options. That's the key there, is that there are options to consider. And certainly lastly, you could always refund a portion of the account based on a scholarship. And on our website in the forms section, we have a cancellation or refund policy. So I would encourage you to take a look at that just to have an understanding of what kinds of refunds require what kinds of conditions where you have limitations on what you can or cannot take out at a certain time. Refunds can certainly always be made, but in terms of a scholarship, we would be limited to giving you only what the scholarship amount was in any given year. So it's a good idea to take a look at that. The other one is if students decide not to go to college, and I hear that question a lot because we certainly don't know what our students are going to do later on in the year, especially when you start saving when they're much younger. And the encouragement here is not to do anything right away. The student has 10 years from the time that they graduate from high school or start using the account to actually use it up. The student can also use it for a master's program, so it's not required only for a 2-year or 4-year or a vocational college term. They can again use it into a master's or graduate program. So if they say, I'm not going to go to college right now, and then later on they decide that they will, and then they end up moving farther along past their high school graduation, as long as they've started using it, they have a 10-year window to use it up. You can also transfer it to another family member. So in the instance where one may not go and another one is, you can move it between family members. And certainly also you can take a refund of the account. So it would be a good idea to review that cancellation or refund policy for that. Now, if families move out of state, and that actually happens quite a bit, I mean, we all don't stay stationary. So when you've opened up a GET account or even any 529 plan, you still have access to it and you still have the benefits of using it wherever your student goes to college or wherever you have moved to. So you can continue to make contributions as you see fit to do so, and then still continue to use it. The thing to remember about when you withdraw it and you're using it is that the value of that GET account is always keeping up with the tuition amounts at the highest price Washington Public School. So it's not going to be equal to tuition in another state. So if you have more questions about that or need more details, I would encourage you to give us a call or take a look at the frequently asked questions on our website about that question. And then the last one, you know, we hear often too is, well, what if my family situation changes and I've made these contributions? What happens to the money? Now, in terms of that lump sum plan that I talked about, remember, people are able to contribute at any time in any amount that they want to. They can flow in and flow out, put more in, put less in, things like that. So in a lump sum plan, there's no requirement. If you were to have a custom monthly plan where there's that specific monthly payment and you had a financial situation change, we would encourage you to call into our contact center and speak to our staff, and they can help you with specific options that are relevant to your account and help you make some decisions about whether or not you need to change the plan, or you know how you would want to work with that account, including, you know, other contributions that are coming in from other people. The key to this, the specifics about that question is really that there are options. In fact, with all of these, there are options to consider. Certainly refunding is one of them, but we want you to know, you know, like what other possibilities there are before you taking a refund. Because on refunding accounts, there are expectations of the taxes on the earnings portion if you ever refund any 529 plan. So we're going to move next into some common misconceptions about not just specifically a Get account, but these are things that I've heard from people over the years about saving in general. And one of the first things that, you know, I will often hear people say is, well, I really can't afford to save any money, you know, and that is, there's a reality to that. I mean, we all have, you know, live in different circumstances and different situations. So saving money is a personal endeavor. And we don't encourage families to save based on what is or is not affordable. We can't say what's affordable for somebody, but we'd rather help you think through making those decisions about saving with your own goals and spending habits and family situations in mind as you plan for that. And an example of that is there may be a family who's got, you know, 3 kids versus 1 kid. Your savings is going to look a little bit different between them. The key here is making just a decision to put something away. And there's nothing that's too small. I mean, every little bit that's saved is less that has to be borrowed in the future, and that's kind of the norm to think about, or the mentality to kind of go forward with. A little goes a long way, and so just encouraging families to save what you can just means that less is borrowed in the future. So one example of like what we've done in our family too about kind of encouraging that savings norm is I put a jar by my front door, and we just drop change all the time. And as we kind of collect that change up, we might first deposit it into the credit union, let it sit there for a little bit, and then move it to the college savings account a little bit later on. But another thing is, you know, thinking about the things that, you know, are normal in your life that you might be able to pull back on, like, you know, instead of a coffee a day at the coffee shop, maybe only 4 in a week instead of 5 in a week or something. The idea here is really to think about in your own family situations, what are the things that you can make small changes on in order to create some opportunities to take money and put it somewhere else. And I even heard somebody tell me that they had that their process of decluttering their home became a savings opportunity for them, because they taking things out of their home that they no longer needed and then reselling it to someone else gave them an opportunity to focus that money on being set aside for their kids' college savings account, which was, I thought, was, you know, a really brilliant idea, and it killed 2 birds with 1 stone because she decluttered at the same time. And another thing is about 529 plans and financial aid availability. A lot of times I have heard people say, well, my kids aren't going to get financial aid if I save in a 529 plan. I heard that from my neighbor or my friend or somebody in the grocery store. And what I would say to that is that in any way that a family is saving money for college expenses specifically, it's important to learn about how that money is going to be treated when calculating financial aid. So meaning that the money it could be considered either a parental asset or parental or student income, you know, those kinds of things. So knowing how that's going to play out is just as important as the saving itself, but it doesn't prevent one for the other. So the short answer to this misconception is that having money saved, whether it's in a 529 plan or anything else, does not prevent a student from receiving financial aid. But you do want to get to learn about, to make sure that you have received information or learned information about the different ways that you may be saving. And again, remember I've mentioned this in a previous slide, is to be encouraged to save in a variety of ways, but to know that how that's going to be treated, whether a parental asset, a student asset, or parental income or a student income, could have some effects on how financial aid availability is made to the student. But you would just want to know that ahead of time. It doesn't mean it prevents it. Now the third one, and until I was a grandparent, I didn't really actually think about this one too much, but the question about whether or not a grandparent should own a 529 plan versus the parent. And the reality on this is, though, assets are owned by a grandparent. So if the grandparent is named as the account owner on the 529 plan, it may not be counted. It's certainly not on the FAFSA form. It's not questioned on the FAFSA form in the first year or two that the student is completing the FAFSA forms. But the key here is that if the grandparent withdraws that money, then, you know, remember, either a direct payment request or doing a reimbursement request in any way that they have taken that money to use it to pay for qualified educational expenses, it then becomes, it is then given to the student, and it is counted as student, it could be considered as student income. And so kind of backing up a minute here too, on the if you have a 529 plan, when calculating for financial aid, it's a parental asset. And when they calculate parental assets, they only use a formula of 5.6, up to 5.6% of parental assets in determining the EFC. But in student income, that percentage could be as high as 50%. So again, we do have some resources for you to take, and I'll point that out later on, that you would want to consider in understanding how the way you've saved means how it's considered for financial aid, whether it's an income or an asset, and whether it's the students or the parents. The key to this misconception, though, is that it shouldn't be that, oh, grandparents, it shouldn't be the owner, or parents shouldn't be the owner. The reality is that both can be, but you just want to know how that's going to play out. And then there's always the opportunity of changing that ownership. So I'm a grandparent, and I currently own 529 plans for my grandkids, but we may change that ownership over to parents in the future if we wanted to, or change it to the students if we wanted to, or I can continue to maintain the ownership of that. There is no very bad or very good way of expecting that you know, it doesn't prevent the student from getting financial aid is probably the better answer for that. And then the other one is Roth IRAs or savings bonds. And the misconceptions about that too has always been surrounded by, well, I shouldn't have a Roth IRA, or I should have a Roth IRA or a savings bond versus having a 529 plan. And to clarify, a Roth IRA is a retirement account. And so while retirement assets do not have to be reported on a FAFSA form, any distributions from that IRA will increase the parent income that is reported on the FAFSA form. So you got to think about how that's going to play out in terms of the EFC. Now, in all of these different ways of saving, whether, you know, I've talked about a Roth IRA, there's also UGMA and UTMA, which are accounts that the student would own, custodial accounts, and then there's also the Coverdell accounts, which is a custodial account. All of these are really great ways of saving, but there are differences between whether they're an asset or an income, and you would want to know that as you're continuing to save in all those features. So, and a savings bond, the effects of a savings bond really depends on who it is registered to. Hi, everybody. Thank you again for your patience. And I think the last thing we covered was just a reminder, the main thing to take away from these misconceptions is that not all monies are calculated the same way when determining a student CFC, but all of the different ways of savings are viable and reliable methods. It's important for parents and students to know that the money that they saved in any form is considered, whether or not it's considered a parent or student asset versus a student or parent income, just so that you are prepared. Because money saved, no matter how it's saved, is still available to cover expenses for college. And then, therefore, it kind of in the end, it really reduces the amount the student would have to borrow in the future. And that's really key to reducing that, that debt amount that we want students to not have or carry so much of. So I want to just kind of a call out to all of you for the work that you do as counselors and just kind of bring up this awareness piece, this call to action, you know, because as you've heard me kind of talk about, you know, the technical pieces about the GET program, the thing to remember through it all, you know, and as I've mentioned several different times, is really about reducing student debt, and it's about building up the success for the student. The more successful they are in getting through college and worrying less about how that expense is going to be covered, the most that we can do ahead of time for them to prepare them for that and prepare ourselves as well is really going to just build up that success rate for the students. So I have 3 questions, you know, not something that I want to spend too much time on, but would hope that you would just ponder these things a little bit as you work with students and reach out to us. But first is like, how are you raising awareness of the importance of saving for higher education? Not just with your students, but also with the families that you interact with, and even your coworkers and colleagues. How are you ensuring that parents and students understand how savings can support that student's success? And then again, what can we do to build that opportunity up for that? Not that, you know, whether we are or aren't, but how can we build that up? And then what resources can you provide and that we can provide to you to provide to both parents and students to ensure that they have as much information as possible and as early as possible, so that they're getting started kind of earlier in the game than later in the game. So I'm going to move into our next session, which is some legislative impacts on the GET program. In 2015 legislative session, a bill was introduced, and it was 5954, that lowered tuition for 2 academic years. So we're in the end of that second time, the 2016-17 academic year. Now that during that bill capped future tuition growth as well. And then it directed the GET committee to freeze what's called our payout value. Now that payout value is what the units are worth for 2 years, and then make adjustments to keep our customers' accounts whole. And the program was also directed by the legislature to kind of to review and report back to them on future options of the GET program, and also the feasibility of opening a traditional 529 savings plan. So taking a quick pause here, this is just a reminder of what happened in the 2015 legislative session. So that was Senate Bill 5954 where that came into play. Now, the committee took action immediately after that, which was, again, the priority was our existing account owners and keeping their accounts whole. So the payout value was frozen, which was was $117.82 a unit, which represents 1 year of tuition at the UW before the tuition decrease that 5954 directed. So at that time, tuition at UW-Tacoma was $11,782 for the year. So we also delayed new unit sales and contributions for up to 2 years, so that we have not been open for the past 2 years. We'll talk about our reopening in just a few minutes. We were also, one of the actions the committee took was refunded what was called an amortization fee on unredeemed units. So for customers who had purchased units at 163 or 172, part of that unit price included what was called an amortization fee. And so we did the fee itself, because of the reduction in tuition and the program was funded at that point more than 100%, that fee became unnecessary, so we were able to refund that fee back to any customers who purchase units at those prices only. So that fee was only included in the unit price at years at those 2 unit prices. So people who had bought units maybe at 117 or 101 or anything less than that, the amortization fee was not included in that unit price. So that was an automatic process. We had already completed that last year in getting all that money or those amortization fee refunds sent back to people. If you know of people who have questioned that or have received money back and they didn't understand why, I would encourage you to tell them to contact us, but also we have a lot of information in the frequently asked questions section about that amortization fee and that refund that people would have received. So we also provided a temporary, non-penalty refund window, and that is currently through September 1 of 2017, or 60 days after the start of the savings plan, whichever happens first. And so that would mean, you know, this coming September, now this non-penalty refund temporary refund window, what that really means is that between now and September of 2017, or 60 days after the start of the savings plan, if a customer chooses to cancel and refund their account, the program would not charge a penalty fee. However, if there are earnings on the account, the IRS may still charge a penalty fee, and then taxes would still be a part of that would need to be paid on any earnings on that account. The encouragement here too would be to make sure that you're taking a look at the cancellation or refund policy for all the specific details, or if you know somebody who's had these questions, to really point them in the direction of that cancellation or refund policy, which can be found on our website in the forms section. It's one of the very first items that will be there. So the college savings plan, which is, again, what was mentioned earlier, an additional savings option that's being explored. So in late 2015, the GET program began exploring that option of opening a 529 savings plan. So that means that we would, in addition, you know, to having the GET, which is the prepaid tuition plan, also have the college savings plan. So in early 2016, the legislature then passed Senate Bill 6601, which created the framework and some funding options for the starting of that savings plan. So a new plan would complement the GET program, so parents would have an opportunity to choose between one or the other or both. And the new plan would also be open to families who are not Washington residents. So much like what I described earlier about 529 plans, this one would, you know, people anywhere in the country could open a Washington 529 savings plan as well. So what's next with GET? So right now we're preparing to reopen this year, which is a really great thing, and we're very enthusiastic about that. We're scheduled to reopen by the end of 2017, or within the, you know, now and or actually through the summer, early fall. Once the new unit price is set, that's the key to the reopening date. The GET committee is working right now with the state actuaries to set that new unit price, and that we'll have that answer and that information once the 2017 legislative session ends. And I believe right now they're in a extended session right now. So the GET committee is also reviewing program policies to determine if any changes are going to be needed there. So these things would roll out as soon as the enrollment period reopens again later this year. So the savings plan. So when the committee considered various options for starting that savings plan, and the first was running it in-house using the GET infrastructure. The second was working with a vendor to help run that program or that plan, and third, partnering with another state's 529 plan. And our current status right now is that we're pursuing the option of working with a vendor. The RFP was issued earlier in the year, and it closed on May 2nd, so we're reviewing the proposals right now. And the target date for opening of that savings plan would either be late 2017 or early 2018. Again, both plans, you know, to be available, and then each of them complementing each other. So as we round out this webinar, there's some other reading that might be helpful for you for one, clarification, but also further information, is our website, the GET program, at www.get .get.wa.gov. So there you're going to find not just information about GET, but also updates on the program, the reopening, and the savings plan. The Washington Student Achievement Council, which is our parent agency, learn about the other programs that the agency administers, such as the College Bound Scholarship Program, and then there's Ready, Set, Grad, there's the washboard.org, financial aid. There's a lot of great resources there for you and for sharing with parents and students. The College Savings Plan Network is actually an independent source for all 529 plans nationwide. So this is a great spot to get some very detailed, informative, and even basic information about 529 plans. And so if you have a 529 plan or you know people that do, and you've noticed that there's some things that that I've talked about that you didn't realize or didn't know and you want to dig deeper, that's a good place to start right there. And then certainly IRS Publication 970. This one is where you learn about 529 plan tax treatments and benefits. You can find all of these links too on our website directly, and even the council's website will direct you to most of these other ones as well. So if you have questions, I am happy to go through that. And then you'll see here is also my contact information. I would take that down, and the contact center information. And all of us, any of us, would be happy to reconnect with you. Okay, we're going to start with some questions here. Can grandparents in Washington open an account for grandchildren in another state? Absolutely. In fact, we have that happen quite a bit. And the other part of it is that if a grandparent lives in another state, but the grandchildren live here, they too can also open an account. So when our enrollment period opens, again later this year, if you're the grandparent, you can do an enrollment form, set up the accounts, and then start making contributions to it and encourage other people to do so as well. So another question, so it can affect or prevent something like being eligible for federal Pell Grant or loans. No, I don't. Okay, let me get back to that one. Not clear how to answer this question for a parent. Bullet number 2.
And I think it's on your presentation.
Okay. I'm going to go through these and then try to get the ones that are pretty much the same before I. There is a message on the screen that says your battery is low. Thank you, Magdalena, about the battery low thing. We got that. We lost. We just. Okay, where am I going? Can GET funds be applied, rolled over directly to a 529 plan? Yes. So if you have a GET account right now and you would rather not refund it and you just want to move it to another 529 plan, another state's 529, we have a rollover form. So you, again, in the form section, that's what you would look for, is the rollover form, and we can initiate that for you. So okay, so we're going to go back to the other question about, so it can affect or prevent something like being eligible for federal Pell Grant or loans. Okay. So back to the question about how does it affect financial aid, and maybe I wasn't explaining it in as great a detail as I should, but if you have a 529 plan, and I'm only going to talk about that instead of like the Roth IRA or anything else, I'm going to keep it specifically about 529 plan. It doesn't prevent a student from receiving financial aid. But what it can do, remember I mentioned that money in a 529 plan is considered a parental asset. So when they're determining the student's need-based financial aid, they're going to calculate up to 5.6% of the parental assets. So all of the parent's assets up to 5.6% to determine what the need is. Now that may or may not mean that they're eligible for the Pell Grant or not. I wouldn't be able to, none of us would be able to say, yes, they're eligible or no, they're not. It really depends on what all the assets are. But the contrast is that if you had money in a different form and it's considered more of a student income or parental income or even student asset, the calculation is between 20 and 50% in determining what their need-based is. So 529 plans are a favorable way to save that opens up the door for more availability for financial aid that isn't just strictly loans. Now, part of your question too was about, does it prevent them from getting loans? Absolutely not. But money saved means that you want to pull from that bucket to pay for expenses before you're actually having to pay for it off of a loan. And a good way to kind of picture that, like when my son was ready for college, I had money sitting in his 529 plan. Here it is, and I know how much he has. I know how much it's worth. Then when he's presented with his financial aid package, how much of that was loans that I'd have to take out? Well, I'm going to use free money first, which is the money that either he got from scholarships or that we had saved, and I'm only accessing loan amounts for the smallest amount. I'm not having to cover all of the expenses by way of a loan. So I hope that's answering your question. If not, and you'd like to talk a little bit more, please take down my phone number and my email address and connect with me, and I'm happy to kind of explore that a little bit deeper. So I appreciate the opportunity to share this information with all of you. And again, we have another question. How realistic is forget Those are the last question that just came in from Colin. Very good question. And with our reopening, you know, the best answer for that right now is that because we are reopening, it's very realistic. The thing to remember about the GET program, and I may not have actually specifically covered this at the very beginning, but this has been true through as the program opened and right up until now, is that the GET account is not part of the state general fund. It is a separate trust account only for the participants of the program. So as people are contributing money, that account stays in a trust account for them, and they are the only people who can withdraw and use the money. So the state can't use that for other programs or for other things. So as we realize that, you know, with the tuition reduction and then tuition, again, the cap, you know, the expectation of the cap is around 2.2% growth, but we don't know that to be a reality yet. You know, we know what's happened in the past, and we know what they're saying could happen in the future, but until each of those moments hit, we don't really know what tuition increases will be. The program has, you know, when we closed for those 2 years, it was in response to a tuition reduction and in response to the legislature asking us to take a look at the feasibility of the program moving forward. And so simply because of the reopening, we know that that will be successful. I hope that is helpful for you. Again, if you have further questions or want to dig a little bit deeper, I'm more than happy to talk about that. Please take my name and phone number down, and I'd be happy to connect with you later as well. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jackie. And I know I learned a lot, even though I've heard your presentation before. and I love your examples that you share as well. So this is what we said, the last of our webinars for this school year. So we are excited to get your feedback on topics that you might be interested in for next year. And remember, this is a coordination of a partnership between OSPI and Washington Student Achievement Council. So the focus of our webinars are mostly around career and college readiness, but we do venture off into some other things as well. Another set of webinars that you will be getting some feedback about is related to the data analytics, the GATE, Graduation and Team Effort, that's headed up by Dixie Grunenfelder. So OSPI is offering 2 webinars a month, one from Washington Student Achievement and also one from GATE, which is an OSPI initiative. So everybody, have a great day, and we'll see you later. Thank you.